From bonding curve to multi-billion-dollar project. That's
amazing.
It's hodling away, baby. Let's go. Is this thing on? Is this thing on?
What is Peace doing right now?
Oh, I'm looking for an image of the man himself, my boy.
Well, hello. Welcome back. Episode 61 of Internet Explorers, the first one of 2025. We have no idea what we're doing here today, do we, gentlemen? We're here?
Yeah.
I mean, a little bit of a break. Probably not a huge break. Can you ever detach your brain from the enduring insanity that is crypto? No, you cannot. But excited to be back here with you all. Was very excited for the break last week, and we're 3 days into 2025, and it's already a fascinatingly interesting year. So
it's been a good year. Dude, man, it's crazy how long this break has felt for me. Maybe it's just like what happens when you never take breaks and then take one. But like it feels like we haven't done this show in like months, but we took 1 week off.
Yeah.
So
I mean that's months basically.
I don't know if that means I'm rested or what that means, but I'm ready to go.
I love it.
Yeah.
I mean, geez, I think I was trying to send you links for this, and I was like, oh my God, we could go deep into any one of these things for a long time, and kind of hoping that's what we do here today. Just kind of have most people are still on some version of a break right now, whatever the heck that is. And so I felt like just be more of a casual conversation about some of the intrigues that have popped up as we've been not exploring crypto without like the explicit heartbeat of meetings and outcomes and all these other sort of things around it. So what are we just leaving Ben off stage here? Is like some secret guest, or should
we can get him up? Get him up.
What's up, guys?
Let's go. Calling in from his closet.
Yes.
I get to say that now because I've obviously upgraded my background.
You've upgraded bigly. Look at this.
Yeah.
Nobody knows if Jess is in a new studio or if he just put a blind over his control panel.
Surprise!
Oh, nice. From closet to closet.
Yeah, I want people to see the desire for continuous improvement that I bring to the show. I couldn't expand this office by any means, but I could hang, and might I add, very poorly hang a curtain rod and curtain. So we're back, baby. We're back. How you doing, Ben? You get a restful break, or you just been in the trenches all the time?
The last little bit I've been in the trenches. I feel like, I forget who was tweeting this sometime in September. They were just like, lock in for 6 months of pain and then it'll be back to normal. And I was like, of course, that's an exaggeration. I can have life balance. Like it'll be fine. And then, you just get sucked into the abyss, but it's been good. Some family stuff. It's fun hanging out with people who don't actually, do the crypto thing 24/7. You remember be a proper human for a little bit anyway.
I always look forward to sort of holidays like this because, you get to be around, folks like that. But then I'm really curious about what the crypto things that have broken through into their world are. And I would say 99% of the people that I talked to crypto about brought up Hawk Tua as the thing. Like that is the thing that jumped the shark over the last little while. And it's like just confirming everybody's biases on crypto. And but the subtext was, "Fuck, I wish I bought more Bitcoin." So I think we're making progress. We're making progress. Yeah, I piece out for breakfast this morning, and it was eavesdropping on some normies talking about AI. So how you doing, Peace?
I'm doing good. The conversation was just so totally insane. It was just like, just a person saying that they've never used GPT on pure moral principles.
No, one of those.
And I won't go into the rest of the details, but just hearing that so confidently and talking to them about, or hearing them, it just was shocking. Where it was like, damn, you're just not even going to use it. But they're like proudly paying for Adobe stock. And fine. Yeah, fine. Like, great. The stock images work for you. There's some good ones in there, but it's just crazy to me.
I mean,
Yeah, just guaranteeing your irrelevance.
It's just as sad. It's just sad. People have been pitched the thing. They're talking about their convention that they run and all the money that goes into it and how they don't want to line their pockets. Like they wouldn't take a wage for themselves for this. All very admirable, high moral stuff. This was like sad to someone give so much of themselves away and just be unwilling to like use a base level tool.
Your mic is kind of being I think you're covering your mic, but we got the gist of that. But yeah, I don't know, man. I feel like this is going to be the year of that type of thing. You know, there's sort of, I mean, a lot of change coming that I feel like certain pockets of the world are talking about and others are not. And it feels like you should probably be on the right side of that train. I don't know.
It's kind of weird to remember that we're like, I don't want to pump our bags too hard, but a bit on the edge of the edge. Like a lot of people don't even know what Claude is. They just, if they've heard of AI, it's maybe ChatGPT, right? Like there's layers to it basically of adoption. You definitely get the moral people too. Oh, the copyright and the environment and every possible reason to not use the cool thing. But
I mean, who's going to buy my AI agent bags though? We need to get them on. We need to onboard the masses into
This break, I spent a lot of time going on TikTok lives and asking people what tokens they hold and asking what the ticker is. People love that question. They're like, what's a ticker? Like, and you can see the doubt in their mind. And they're like, fuck, I should know what this means. And asking them about Fartcoin. And it's pretty 50-50, but mostly people love saying Fartcoin. Like
bullish.
Yeah,
that's a thesis right there.
It's nice. People like to say it. Yeah.
I mean, I had a bunch of fun conversations with friends who, I don't know, at some point asked me like what to fuck around with in crypto, and I like told them to go on Moonshot and like whatever, play around with like a little bit of money, and just like being able to have some like weird meme coin conversations with like some of your normal friends is pretty fun. It's pretty fun. Like they're talking about the shit that we talk about every day. Obviously, we like a very different perspective, and they're just seeing the ticker and the image and kind of trading off of that. But it's so funny to like, they know about AI 16Z and they like know about like what happened, like the chill guy kind of pump and decline and like all this stuff that like is just like so intuitive to us. Like having that with whatever, someone that's like a painter or something, it's just hilarious.
Yeah, I did some golf bro onboarding over the break, so slowly but surely. All right. Well, I think we got Ben hanging out with us today. I think Nicholas might join a bit later on. Kind of just Josh piece. I just love this idea of kind of not being driven by a schedule on this call and just kind of giving the appropriate amount of time to these things and some dead space, because I think these are all, well, I mean, we didn't do last week. I think there's sort of like obviously a whole lot of stuff has happened over the last couple of weeks, and making sense of it probably is a worthwhile endeavor here. I think the way that Sterling framed up the tweet that went out to promote this was like, we got questions. I think it's probably the best way to describe at least my current stance on much of this stuff. Let's get
what I think a lot of these topics too are just like they all kind of merge and blend together at the highest levels too. So I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think the first topic I put, and I think the way to kick it off is, I think we all had a bunch of downtime, kind of weren't in meetings, weren't in like, maybe we were in Telegram chats, but maybe not the usual ones, that the productive ones that we spend most of our time in. So just kind of, I don't know, wanted to pose a question to you guys of like, what kind of, were there any rabbit holes you went down? What did you read that you wanted to catch up on? What kind of captured your interest in this like kind of open space? And if there are any kind of, I don't know, big like takeaways that kind of came out of that period that you're kind of gonna hold into 2025.
Yeah, good question, man. I think, what did I tinker with? I set up a Wayfinder wallet. That is, you can't do anything with it, at least from what I can tell so far, but they were doing some sort of farming campaign where you can set these things up. And I just think, like, I'm trying to figure out what happens with all the AI stuff. I'm in the bucket of a lot of this the current kind of chatbots feel a bit sloppy, and wondering like, okay, what now, right? Like what happens when the novelty of just that angle of this wears off? And I think Wayfinder is going to be big. Just like you can do stuff on chain with an AI instead of listen to it yap about crypto, which is cool in its own way, right? But I just think this is probably the next level up. And it's cool that you're going to just be able to, like, with text prompts, do a bunch of stuff on chain. And we've talked for so many years about like, bridge, then swap, then wrap, then stake, then do this thing. And people are just like, oh man, I don't want to do that. And I think Wayfinder is going to be kind of an answer for the normal people too, you know?
Oh man, I mean, I got one of my golf buddies to join wow.xyz, and you know, there's and it was like literally 7 separate times I had to message back and forth to get him to even figure out. It's like, okay, he's like, I have ETH in my wallet. Why can't I buy anything here? I'm like, all right, well, let me tell you about L2s. And I mean, it's I think, you know, for all the talk of how easy, if you kind of go through, like if you're on Uniswap, it's fairly effortless to do a transaction in one token, you know, swap to other, whatever, can abstract that away. But there's still all these little pieces that pop up, like the Uniswap front end right now. You know, you go and you type in a coin. If you don't have the correct networks selected, you're not even able to go find the thing. And I understand that, you know, why that probably needs to exist. But from a new user perspective, like, good God, like, so yeah, I think this. I mean, we had the Fungi guys on a couple weeks ago that are, you know, building agentic tools for DeFi specifically, really with this core thesis. And I think introduces a bunch of other kind of challenging things for sure. Like you really want to make sure that this stuff is working. I think we had in the spaces that we hosted right before Christmas, Ross came on, who's building Nanny, which is sort of taking a very like you want to make sure that I guess have smart contract based approach to this, and that like if you do say specific things will result in very specific actions and no room for hallucination, and you kind of have a higher degree of trust around stuff like that. So I think this sort of narrative right now around the slop is very real, but I think there is a lot more there than maybe a casual read of, you know, what's happening, or at least the early examples are, and the speed of development that's happening around some of these things. You know, AI16Z.
Yeah.
It's just absolutely wild. So I think this is going to come. I mean, I understand like the pushback because it's clearly in a hype cycle. I think you've seen Kyle Samani be kind of pretty bearish on all this sort of stuff, but I think that is also kind of a wrong take. And I think the sort of like sense that agents or AI are a new type of network, and that these things will sort of result in new types of things, I think is intuitively correct. And we're sort of in the early stages of trying to figure out what that looks like.
Well, I think there's just so much more value in like forcing yourself to almost like overestimate how quickly stuff is going to come versus taking the stance that like, oh, this is all shit. It's going to take way longer than I expect. And that's just kind of always, yeah. Anytime I see these like agent bear posts, it's like, okay, cool. But if you just, you know, I think I added a bunch of them in the agent prediction section, but like, you know, Masari and a bunch of these people are like, agent launch pads are going to peak in Q1 2025, and it's like, okay, maybe, but if you just hold that perspective and like internalize that, and then just like ignore them going forward, like you're going to miss the potential that actually all of this does come way quicker. And I think being positioned for that, both like, you know, your attention and learning, but also, you know, your bags is there's way more upside in that.
Yeah, I wouldn't take the under on AI development right now, especially today. You know, maybe specific instances of it, and yeah, we throw a token on top of it, and everybody starts to overhype everything for sure. But you know, maybe that's where I spend most of my time over the break. Was really diving into a lot of the writing and, you know, podcasts of. You know, I think the Dwarkesh podcast is phenomenal. If you go back over the last 6 months, some of the deep dives he's done with, you know, on AI alignment, on, you know, the folks that were kind of core to the launching of ChatGPT, on the founders of these different products. You know, the takeaway there isn't, oh, this shit has reached a peak and slowing down, and therefore we're just going to go try to like make iterative improvements. It's like phase shifts coming, to, you know, new inflection points coming, hard, like impossible to predict, but you know, the speed of which this change is coming is not one of those things that people are really doubting. It's exactly the opposite. So.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like the narratives just get a bit ahead of their skis. Like I'm thinking of DeFi summer food coins. Eventually there's a period where you're like, we should probably chill out. Like, this is a little bit crazy. And then there's still another 6 to 9 month leg of DeFi, being really interesting in that cycle. Even the pump fund stuff recently where you're like, wow, these live streams are really getting, interesting. And then everyone feels like cringe about Solana. It has kind of a couple month lull, but that doesn't mean that Solana's just done, right? So I think we're sort of in that first blow off a bit where you're like, all right, this was interesting. But I think, there's a lot still to go.
I mean, I was listening and reading about AI, and then I was just watching my AI 16Z bags because that gave me the most joy over the holidays. From bonding curve to multi-billion-dollar project. And I was
amazing.
Just hodling away, baby. Let's go. I mean, PC, you were just designing the Grok logo for X. Is that what you were spending your Christmas break doing? You got new eyes and you designed the Grok logo?
I wish they'd let me make something that beautiful. Yeah, the
X is also an A. Do you get that?
And an I.
Oh, those dirty dogs.
Yeah, like XAI. They got it all in there. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think honestly my admittedly was like chasing kids around more than I would have liked to during the break. I would have liked to just absorb Dwarkesh podcasts and read stuff. But I think my big takeaway from just having space is just the like reminder of like the importance of focusing, both like personally, I think, looking back in the last year, could have done like just a much better job with like explicit time management, right? Like it's so easy to just get caught up in all the shit that's happening every day. 99% of it is noise. The way that you actually, learn the most and make the most progress is, by building stuff and focusing in on stuff. So I think like personally and, as well as just at kind of like the Seed Club organizational level, right? Like building networks like inherently has a much larger opportunity space than, focusing on some like narrowly defined like product or company. But that, doesn't mean that we can just go do everything. It, still means that we need to go focus and get the right things right first and kind of plan our steps, very strategically. So I think that was kind of the thing that was just kind of rattling around in my head the whole time was just like, oh, this space feels very good. Like, how do I keep this while being productive and getting back into like the flow of work?
Yeah, I think it's hard to see the thing, like the downsides of being plugged in all the time. And there's sort of like a intensity focus that kind of comes as trying to stay up to date with what's happening and do your work and move things forward. And yeah, I think like I'm always just amazed at what I discover or what kind of comes across my feed in these moments where I'm not hyper fixated on just trying to move a thing forward, every single day. And I think we have a couple of those things on the docket here today. But Cognicos, that post for me was like, came at the very right time, added some new specific language and a slightly different framing to things that, I think we've been saying and excited about and probably seeing, but didn't kind of put that lens on it. And I'm not sure.
Do you want to just jump into it?
Let's do it.
Run it.
All right. So this is a post from Scott Belsky, who has been doing a great job of writing his implications newsletter over the last while. Yeah, actually, I found this post from Hunter good. He's like, the more I think about AI agents, the more I think it perfectly parallels the 19th century advent of the corporation, able to enter contracts itself, hire humans, own things, and outlive people. Corporations were feared and now number in the millions. We all work for them and they produce everything we use and consume. Why won't AI agents be similar? And like, I think, what I see him trying to say there is that that agents can sort of be a new type of network, right? Or there's this new structure that will be sort of coordinating and allocating and, trust minimizing, all these sort of things that sort of corporations did when you came out of the sort of feudal era and into the sort of modern world, that AI will kind of be that. And I think, I disagree with the idea that agents are sort of the center of this. I think it's sort of agents are kind of at the edges. And that's kind of the post that Scott gets into with the this idea of Cognicos. And so he's sort of This post is called "The Cognition Stat for AI Native Companies and Why Sales Support and Social are Converging." It's basically describing DAOs, but where the center of DAOs are data and AI rather than individuals and governance tokens. And he makes the argument that like the biggest opportunity that probably exists right now is for people to build these types of companies in specific niches or verticals, and that there's going to be massive value sort of accruing to these. And I think if you scroll down a bit, he's got a really great image that I think captures this better. Keep going down a little bit there. So he sort of describes this, right, where you have data at the center. You have models that are sort of, the coordinating sense-making tools. You have reasoning, which are sort of like the rules and brand values and, ways of doing things, and et cetera. And then on the edges, you have these nodes, and nodes are sort of, in his framing, are like almost individual business units that are participating. I think that might be too narrowly defined as well. And of course, all these sort of actions together, along with, the agents that are actually executing things on the edges, are going to bring a ton of scale and unlock new value. And I think this sort of from corporation to network is, if we sort of, I don't know how long this sort of takes that to come. I think there's, a lot of people that are kind of building versions of this right now, but it seems very likely that this type of thing generally is kind of the next iteration of, coordinating entity or in our economy. And so I love that it came from this very non-crypto point of view. I think some people try to say these are DAOs, and I think Scott's pushback was like, yeah, maybe, but it's probably a lot bigger than that, or at least not solely, crypto focused. But I think, from my point of view, the big difference maker here that crypto brings is that you have a token at the center of here, and you have sort of the cumulative network value accruing to that token. It just seems like, if I'm going to make a bet on what the sort of the most compelling versions of these in the future will be, they will be built on crypto rails and crypto stacks, and have kind of a token at the core. So it allows for this global 24/7 participation. So yeah, this one has been pretty impactful in my thinking.
Yeah, I agree. I think really my big takeaway maybe from reading this post is it feels like AI is kind of in the like fat protocol thesis stage of like AI, like whether like fat foundational model thesis or whatever, but we're already kind of seeing they're getting commoditized already, right? And they're going to keep improving, but they're all going to keep improving. And I think largely what the case he makes, and I think the case I would probably make too, and what David makes in the fat app thesis and its evolution from kind of the infrastructure layer capturing all the value to the actual like productive use of the infrastructure layer capturing the value is that the things that use these foundational layers have a mission people want to come and participate in, can kind of like compound value, plug in whatever new tools are emerging or like are building on the improving foundational models are ultimately going to be the things that probably are the biggest.
I mean, I think a core question that I think it's important to ask is like what gets harder, what's hard and what's easier here. And I think the thing that gets harder here is standing out and being trusted. And so I think like the idea that brand and IP become more and more valuable in this world, especially as the fragmentation. If you sort of look at what's happened in traditional IP lands, where like as social media kind of became the dominant force, you had this fragmentation of attention, and we no longer have these. And so then you have like these tentpole strategies that large media companies have brought out. It's why we have 17 Avenger movies and all these sort of reruns, et cetera. It's because breaking through with new IP is very, very hard. And of course, we've seen the value of sort of old IP grow because of that. And so I think, I think building in crypto has kind of given us an early look at what more of the economy will look like when things are, most smart contracts are open source, infinitely copyable almost immediately, and yet still the value flows mostly to those that are first and have built trust and have kind of on the front end. And then as AI sort of continues to progress and cost to copy and go down, which I think is one of the big unlocks that AI brings, is that you can copy more and more complex things easier. That sort of tech moat that we're very used to building for as builders becomes less and less compelling. I mean, I think Scott makes the argument that unique data is the thing and unique specific rules, but I think all of those are ultimately building up into what I would just broadly call brand value. I think if you sort of substitute brand value with token, there is like the unit that's actually capturing that. I think that seems the most right to me.
Yeah, I did also like how kind of like pro-human of a view he has on like the future of corporations. Like it's very easy to, just say, humans largely are going to be out of the workforce. We're not going to be necessary. Everything's going to be AI. The economy is going to be completely understandable to us. And like, maybe, but I think that this was like a kind of refreshing other perspective where he's like, actually, there's going to be these very important kind of stewarding functions for humans and like orchestrating functions for humans and like leadership functions for humans when you are trying to solve this, probably largely, human problems. So I think it was kind of a cool view on the future of organizations that, still has humans as important parts of the the inputs.
It makes me think too, like the value of personal brand is going to be really significant and just keep growing because humans still have to make human decisions. And so you're just filtering a different world that assumes like way more AI agents, way more, I don't know, just non-human activity on the internet. And so, yeah, it's kind of like, of course, there's going to be network value, like corporate value in brands, but I think there's going to be a lot of personal value too. I don't know. It's interesting. Like we threw around that Less Wrong article. I'm not sure if other people have read it. It's a little more on the doomer side, but the idea that you have kind of a window of time where like you can build a lot of differentiation, whether it's personal brand or, business moat, these sorts of things before, if nothing else, AI comes in and clutters a lot of stuff. And we're in that kind of banana zone in the middle. It's interesting.
It was like cars in a pedestrian lane. It's like it makes it unusable. Right. It makes it unusable for people walking, but it's incredibly efficient for whoever driving. It's like
I like that.
I don't know. Yeah.
I'm
a little exhausted by the like bot versus human talk because every bot or whatever algo trader or anything is serving either one person or a group of people and whatever their initiative is.
For now.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, at least I don't think I guess I'm of the opinion that endures, and also there are a lot of bots that will serve other bots, and I think we haven't really seen that, and I think it's not going to be the most visible, which is kind of maybe why we should try to pay more attention to it.
Or it's also just like not that intentional piece. Like I've opened infinite number of browsers on the internet, and theoretically that was like human initiated, but it was mostly thoughtless, right? So you can spin up a lot of AIs to do a bunch of stuff, and I feel like the clutter angle is just a lot more than the intention angle for me there. Like this is even independent of AGI. Just like right now, the stuff that AIs get used for, if you're even just talking about Twitter, crypto, bots and stuff, it's not that hard to spin one up. So even if they're kind of working on behalf of someone, it's just like some of it is just spam too.
It's just spam.
I do think it's interesting how there's clear quality that raises to the top there, though, and how much value will be there. So you look at AI16Z, like that seems to be value based on the developer interest and momentum that's going there, despite there not really being as much execution from a agents actually creating a ton of value perspective, though I think we're starting to see that. And I think that's the AIXBT bot being like clearly one of the like a very connected, analyst type of vibe out there. And, there's a meaningful difference between sort of that feed and not. Now, I think that the question of like how much of that is actually still human curation versus like not human curation, I think is a very fair one. And based on my experience with these things, that my assumption is that there's a ton of human curation involved in these things still to be sort of like the decider of at least what the input is and what's the approved output. But yeah, I think one of the you're talking about personal brand, Ben, and I think that is like a big open question I have, which is like maybe we have these sort of two things growing. Like I think the value of a network of a group of participants coming together to go do something really big is a huge opportunity, will be very large. And also it's very likely that we'll see 1 and 2 person teams go build things that have similar scale and value and, sort of unencumbered by, if you sort of lean into the future that Scott's predicting here, like, you can imagine just having a big adventure and an attention, plugging in a whole bunch of stuff and being able to use like all these other open source frameworks to be able to kind of compete with people that have been building, with the large teams for the last year or two sort of thing. So I think. Do we have that other post, the less wrong post, which I think put up Nicholas?
Yeah, we do. It's in the labor replacing AI.
We should maybe ask the one dev on the call what he thinks.
What was the question?
We're just kind of riffing on future of AI stuff. It's just funny that the three non-technical people have opinions. So I don't know if Jess, you want to tee up.
Oh, Nicholas has opinions too.
Yeah, I think I'm very interested in, to be determined, but I'm sure you've covered it, but will there be a reckoning in backends as a service that caters to agentic workflows such that agents can directly onboard and pay for some backend services without, and maybe even not just agents, but I've been thinking about it as human and AI agents, and sort of bucketing agents as the users, and that there be both humans and AIs that are a part of that cohort. And does it make sense to do KYC and to get an API key, or is there some easier, slicker way where it actually facilitates integration of a backend by doing all the accounting on chain in a trustless way, so that you just stock up your credits or what have you, and the service provider doesn't care who you are? Sort of depends on what service you're providing. Obviously, if you're doing like images, maybe they start to care about what images you're putting up, or there's limitations, but the law still applies. But could we go a step further than something like Stripe in terms of ease of integration from a developer perspective, such that it enables people using Cursor or agents that want to directly tap into some service, apropos of nothing, to just go for it?
Yeah, I think this like future, we're jumping around a lot, but it's relevant. The like future of software post I have at the bottom there really like explores what the future of interfaces look like in this kind of like agentic AI world. And he talks about like marketing shifting towards being like creating good documentation for agents, and like how do you actually, if agents are largely performing a lot of these kind of like utilitarian tasks that we need done, how do you set your product up to be the one that these agents want to use? And I think obviously blockchains play a huge role here. I think documentation is going to play a huge role here, but I tend to think that things like protocol, like referral rewards, or like sharing protocol fees, and kind of the like economic substrate of like rewarding agents for using your thing starts becoming like a really interesting design space.
Well, even before, go ahead, Jess.
Well, I was going to say, think how hard it is right now to sort of manage incentives within, crypto projects, blockchains, et cetera. And, the airdrop narrative, all this sort of stuff. Like, it's very, very complex. And I think, AI is going to be a hell of a lot better at that. And it's probably not that far off. Ultimately, sort of you set some intentions and goals, give it a whole bunch of data, train it a little bit based on, good or bad. And we're just so shit at it right now that I think the bar is pretty low.
So fair. I was just going to call out like Wayfinder paths as kind of an intermediate step, maybe before AIs make their own decisions around what kind of rails make sense for them. You're just going to have human networks of people kind of incentivized to create very specific things that they can do. And, there's a little bit of a reward loop there too. So you have, the best of both worlds in some way. I'm like not qualified at all to talk about what happens beyond that, like once the humans are gone.
It's not stopping you though, Ben, which I love. So this post here is sort of actually, I think the labor replacing AI one I found interesting. You kind of is making an argument that I guess maybe a pushback against the idea that as AI or as AGI sort of emerges, that money won't matter anymore. And he's basically saying, well, actually, no, money will matter more than ever, because it's actually really hard to turn capital into output right now. Hiring labor, hiring good talent, still a very difficult thing, costly, etc. And that with AGI, you're able to replace a bunch of that. And so he sort of argues that we're kind of in the next few years, we might end up with a very static economy or static hierarchy based on one's capital and potentially trust or attention, and that the ability to sort of go from pull yourself up by the bootstraps and go from from poor to rich or not successful to successful is going to be a lot harder to do in this world. And really talks a lot about, or the takeaway I had was sort of more of a feudalistic type of structure, which, if you look at sort of a lot of the promise of what Web 2 is going to bring to the table, you see a lot of similar conversations to kind of where, the AI optimism is today. And, many will make the argument that it's sort of a much more democratizing technology, or at least as more technology comes out, it's likely to democratize it more, which is true. And also what was true is that we kind of have 2 or 3 fiefdoms that we have to go play by the rules, and they sort of tax very aggressively and have extrajudicial, mechanisms for determining who can be in there and who cannot be in there, et cetera. And, I think it's an important point of view to hold, at least because I think it's going to be very easy for unintentional, implications to emerge that make human beings, or that will have negative impacts on our society. I think this is more doomer than at least I hold to be true. And I think in the chat or in the comments below, there's some really great conversations about it. But the thing that I like the most is at the very end here, he has a link to another post where he talks about the dream time. I don't know if you bring that up, piece, because I want to make sure up a little bit. Yeah, that dream time. So Robin Hanson, they wrote this post in 2009, and he's just making this argument, or at least maybe a call to action, to say, like, we're sort of in this moment right now where, human beings of the future will look back on it and be like, oh my God, so much happened in that tight that sort of small time frame, and almost look at us as like, as primitive beings in many ways, and the fact that, maybe we didn't realize how much of an inflection point we were living through, and uses sort of the dream time, which is sort of I guess a Native American concept of some sense of sort of this potential and generative opportunity, et cetera. And so I really liked his post on that. 2009 feels like forever ago, and yet that post feels more real today, that regardless of where this stuff goes, the right action, the right thing to do as a human being that is, wanting to be relevant in the future, is to go and try to have an impact on the world today, participate in it, define it, articulate it. So that's I maybe just my eternal optimism made me just focus on that one piece, even though there's some maybe more doomerism there. And all of us also is sort of dependent on what we mean by AGI and when AGI comes, et cetera. And so I think that timing here is still, complicated, to say the least.
What was some of the like core pushback in the comments on the post? Because it did make a pretty compelling argument, and like use the example of like SpaceX versus Blue Origin, right? Where, like, Bezos had all the money in the world, but Elon was way better at attracting the right talent. So, with much less capital, is able to have like outsized results versus someone with more capital. But in this world where everyone has whatever, like, you can pay for results, or like have infinite galaxy brain employees at your fingertips. Like, how does someone with more capital not just continue winning?
I mean, the argument that seemed the most compelling to me is just an argument of this sort of democratization that technology has brought for around every inflection point. I think there's clearly still limitations to that thinking, but go back to the printing press, or you go back to even just look at Twitter and X today. Like, there's a lot more dynamism that exists because this technology is much more broadly adopted and accessible to people. And I think I'd also make sort of a novelty argument here, right? Where in a world of infinite slop, few things do break through, and those things can have significant outsized returns to it. And I don't think it is purely capital. Now, I think the reality is capital is going to be a massive advantage as it is today. And so I don't think you should discount this necessarily, but yeah.
That's how I read it too.
Yeah.
Like, the advantage angle of just money will have even more of a multiplying effect, basically. Like, you're entrenching winners, but it doesn't mean that you can't have like very serious creativity at the scale of the human population at large, right? So there's always going to be dynamism. At least that's what I want to believe. But I do think there's like, winners win probably a little bit harder in the world.
I mean, the breakout has always been like very non-consensus insights that have allowed someone to like toil away in obscurity for some period of time before it breaks out. So, like, more capital in the hands of unimaginative people probably isn't going to like eat away at those like non-consensus opportunities that ultimately are what change the world.
Well, I think a lot of this depends on what is like what stack ultimately wins, and is it a closed sourced thing that ultimately runs away, or is it, can open source keep up, and do we continue to see the reduction in barriers to participating there? So I don't know, man, but I think you got to get your feet in the arena here. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, I think to me that's how I see it more than, I mean, obviously we'll see, and clearly in terms of developing foundation models, having the capital to build them is prerequisite. Given the scaling, given attention is all you need. However, I see the future as, and you were saying doomer earlier. I'm not sure that it's doomer, but I see a divide between those with agency, high agency, and the rest as being a really defining inequality, a new form or sort of more revealed form of inequality, even than access to capital. And like in the sort of SpaceX Blue Origin example, I think it's a classic one. Just a more motivated agent small number of very motivated agents may be able to create that vision that attracts whatever attention, participation, labor that's requisite for actually launching something that's fundamentally distinguished by its network. I think the thing that the AIs, it depends. I haven't seen an AGI yet, so or maybe I have by some standard, but the thing that they're worst at is maintaining long-term objectives and keeping focus on long-term objectives. So the one thing that is like leading a firm, the key trait for leading a firm, they're weakest at. So it seems like, and people have said this in the past couple months, but it seems likely that a really high agency individual who has their eye on the prize and also is an influencer by one way or another, and is deploying, over the holidays, I've been thinking what I really want is like 1,000 simultaneous O1 Pro processes, constantly doing research and having that research curated by some puppeteer or review board, and only providing to me the top hits. I don't want, and really the only barrier to doing that right now is willpower. I don't think there's a technical barrier, actually. You just have to program it, and O1 Pro can help you program it. So I think we do live in an incredible moment where the arb on AI is going to take a long time for traditional businesses to fully understand, like years and years. It's not like even 5 years, 10 years, 15 years for them to for it to filter through. And I think what we'll find is, as in many things, like what does A16Z give you, for example? Well, it plugs you into the C-suite at Home Depot. So when you have some new Bluetooth doodad, you're right away talking. So the point is that these enterprise B2B deals are often driven by relationships. And it's also the same lesson of YC and A16Z, again, in terms of their network and their ability to connect people. And as we've talked about in the past, like A16Z's copycat CAA model of, using the network to their advantage. I don't think networks should go away. I don't think attention goes away. And I don't think volition goes away. If anything, it's magnified. So what will Elon do? Will Elon have twice as many companies after? Or is he set?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I know. I think you've been, very correct in talking about sort of agency thing, because, the other sort of person I've seen talk about this was Beth Bezos on the Lex Friedman podcast. I've said this a few times, but talking about the sort of techno-capitalist machine and one's feeling of agency in it or lack of agency in it being the biggest determiner of how you see the future. And we started off this conversation with Peace talking a bit about a conversation that was eavesdropping on in a diner of the moral stances one's taking about not using AI, etc. But I think that, we already live in an era where many people feel disenfranchised because of technology. I think that is like maybe the biggest narrative of the last couple of years. The promise and the under delivering on that promise by the common person, I think, has led to a very fear-based and maybe not totally incorrect approach, saying like this isn't actually all good, or at least it's not all good for me. But the decision of whether to sort of step in and try to impact it versus just sort of trying to hide away from it, I think is a very, very, very important one. And I think, from a society perspective, our ability to create more open pathways for people to feel that agency feels really important to me, and probably more important going into the next year than it has been over the last 5 years. And I would argue it was very important over the last 5 years as well. Maybe we just weren't focused on it enough.
Yeah, I would also say on that line, like I think we sort of from the period of like the Bill Clinton White House through recently, you know, I think everyone was kind of surprised and impressed, and they take pot shots, but the EU actually is able to regulate these platforms. And sure, crypto is some counterpoint that is maybe impossible to regulate, but there's also open source developers in jail right now awaiting trial. So I think a return to the political power of the masses to offset the inevitable progress of technology. You know, whenever we talk about technology, it's very common in our circles on this side of the world to assume that it's inevitable and you just need to align yourself with what's inevitable in order to profit. But there are cultures that ban things. I don't think those cultures can ban them forever, but you can ban a technology for 100 years. I don't think, obviously, it's a geopolitical, game theory situation in which it's not advantageous to do so. And if anything, the oil countries are bought in, they're leaning in. But I think it's very possible that we see populist messaging that's anti-technology come back again. And even you see it just over the minor issue of the H-1B stuff.
Oh yeah.
That it couldn't even last until the inauguration. So I think there's going to be a lot of people who are disenfranchised and are low agency, but are sort of have expectations, and that they will manifest those expectations through the application of their collective power in political scenarios, which, I don't know, if there's like some Metal Gear Solid AI running everything, it's like, if the whole thing is a big Russian psyop, for example, operated by AI, then the discontent of the masses in a political context is fuel. It's not an antagonist. It's an opportunity. So I think we're going to see a very, very choppy political situation across the board.
Populist AI? Ooh. Ooh.
drop the CA,
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, we often talk about how we feel behind, like people who are in crypto or AI who spend like 14 hours a day on the internet trying new things, are high agency, like really plugged into things. And you forget that most of the world does not operate like that, whether through like their own choice or just like no access, right? Lack of access. And so I think, yeah, I feel like people probably underestimate how chaotic it could get over the next decade, because change will happen faster than I think anyone is expecting. That's probably the only consensus view, somewhat faster than what I think is probably going to happen. And so I just think, yeah, I don't know. There's going to be a lot of people who don't feel optimistic. And I think my concern is less about like, how do you make political decisions to, I don't know, intervene or something. It's just, I want to make people feel optimistic. So how do you get the hook back into people? To press in and to speed up, and as opposed to, okay, like we need to be really methodical about this, because if you really want to get in the weeds, the last 20 years has been pretty shit for the Europeans economically. They missed the internet in many ways, right? Like whatever the statistic is, no like company that's in their top 100 was invented in the last 40 years, right? It's like an industrial society. And so there's all these trade-offs. There's a lot of rabbit holes we could go down. But I think what I spend my time thinking about is just how do you get people to be optimistic? Because I don't know how to flip and kind of go ahead, Jess.
Well, no, I'm with you there, man. I don't know if I'm being completely honest. I'm optimistic that you can go change that. Right. I think if you think about just the number of people who start companies, it's a very small percentage of people that are actually taking the risks to go build things that ultimately end up employing, large swaths of human beings. And, when you get down into like people who started companies that do more than $10 million in revenue a year, like you're talking about a very, very, very small number of people. And I guess you can make the argument that that's because there's a lack of access or education, and maybe there's ways that we can kind of raise the tide to lift all boats, which I think is true. But I don't think that it's sort of a capital issue or an access issue. Ultimately, when it comes down to it, it's like a human issue. And I don't know, man. Like I'm not the most optimistic that all of a sudden we're going to be able to convert people who aren't high agency in their general day-to-day lives or in their upbringing, or like what are the pieces that need to go into this to make somebody crazy enough to go start something. Like at least proportionally, I'm not sure that grows so much.
I mean,
it is. Yo, go piece.
well, I was just gonna say, I think that you probably have to do it through a moralistic lens. Like, I think it has to, we live in a cowboy culture in America, at least. So you need to either make people feel like righteous criminals, more or less. And if you can run like a Kickstarter type, whatever, it could be your new automated co-op that all of a sudden your neighborhood has like fresh food and your admin is super low and all the people can do the kumbaya shit because of some bot that they've hired. Then
Kumbaya bot.
I think that people really would like that sort of thing. Now, I mean, obviously I'm talking about a very specific type of person when I talk about those things, but I do think the righteous cowboy is the angle that people become excited about tech again.
I mean, I do think it's culture, it's upbringing, it's education. Like, so much of the system of the last 50 years has just been designed to like create good workers, right? And then suddenly like those workers are not going to be needed anymore, and there's going to be this really fucking awkward period, obviously, where like it's like, okay, these people were trained and developed to be useful in a world that no longer exists. But then I think what comes out the other side of that is hopefully just like a relearning of, I don't know, how to find like joy and happiness in this like world of hyperabundance or something.
I think one challenge is that a lot of the kinds of labor that it seems will still be available, which to me, the primary one is human connection. That you can have connection with an agent, but if you're seeking a human connection, you will still need a human. That's one thing that won't go away. But a lot of the types of labor like that may remain relevant are this kind of feminized labor, like social relationships and maintaining those relationships, how people feel. These are things that the last 150 years of industrial development more have really deprioritized or considered not very valuable. So we're walking into a world where the primary types of labor that remain are types of labor that we don't think are worth very much. And the problem with any, I think one, I don't generally like reasoning by analogy, but people used to make this claim constantly that, your average teenager today has access to more information than the president did in 1980. Okay. But it did not come with power. Like, if anything, inequality soared in the period between the launch of the web browser and distribution of broadband, et cetera. So the access to tools did not create opportunity for everybody. And then I would like to see more strict numbers about it, but anecdotally, the types of opportunity that things like Shopify or Instagram created for people, you could argue are not great value generators for society. Like, I don't know that drop shipping, it may make you a bag, but I'm not sure that you're really contributing to society. And if the only kinds of new products and services that we invent are ones that essentially permanently borrow from retail, then it's not going to save retail. And it will be your outlier 17-year-old who, transitioned from drop shipping to social media marketing agency to whatever, AI no-code services provider to AI girlfriend manager to, they're high agency. They will traverse the scene. But does that topography leave anything above the waterline for people who are not? I mean, do they need services from regular people? Not so much. And if so, very poorly paid.
I want to jump in, add one more thing. I feel like at a high level, it's the veil of ignorance thing where you're like, I think it's like John Rawls is this political theorist. Veil of ignorance may not be the correct term, but what he talks about is basically like, how would you design a society if you didn't know your role that you would kind of spawn into? And trying to think about that from first principles with all this tech that is now being invented is just an interesting problem, right? Like, you're not going to solve human agency. Like you're saying, Jess, there's not that many people that are pretty entrepreneurial and are going to push. And, I don't know that, you can really fix human nature, but a lot of the inputs now change with how society is built when all this tech gets really, cheap and available and accessible. And so how do you construct society such that people feel opportunity or dignity or belonging or any of these things that we probably would all want to see? Because all of a sudden the bedrock just got really shaken, right?
Well, and I think we need to zoom out a bunch too, right? Because I think the political discourse we see in both the United States and in Canada right now is really a result of, a removal of opportunity for, I think what you're talking about there, Nicholas, like the type of labor, like the manufacturing base, the sort of the building of real things being offshored. And that's very much an implication of technology. And it happened over a much longer time period. But where we are today is that, populism is the thing that gets you elected, and sort of like a return to traditional values, whatever the heck that means, seems to be, on the rise. And I think that's more so speaking to the current disaffected group of people than it is, some broader moral play that people are taking. And so maybe the right way to think about it is it's just an acceleration of that dynamic. And, human beings still are the coordinators here. And so you can't and probably shouldn't remove those folks from it. And so this political sphere becomes a really important battleground. I think crypto has realized that over the last few years, and obviously had a major impact on the political landscape that we're sort of walking into. And yeah, I mean, I think my entire world view right now is just volatility will run the day. Like, I think we should just be, as the world becomes more networked, and the cost of pushing a byte is zero. Volatility is just the natural outcome from that. And we're strangely trained for that over the last 7 years. I've been in the space for 7 years. It's like the norm, and it's probably a useful skill set moving into the future.
Yeah, for sure. I think also another dimension of that is a return to religion.
Mm-hmm.
I think people will seek guiding meta-narratives, and I think we'll see simultaneously a push for high agency people for deregulation and the displacement of the gerontocracy, who don't understand really basics about computers, let alone what the implications are of those computers. A desire to disempower those people and to let it rip. Simultaneously, the exact opposite impulse amongst those people suffering from the consequences of it, who really want to be insured, healthcare, housing, etc. And I think that's there was this guy Lewandowski, who founded Otto, he left Waymo at Google and started a company called Otto that was an 18-wheeler automation company that was purchased by Uber several years ago and subsequently sued by Waymo for intellectual property theft. And one of the things that he said before he disappeared and went to prison, as I recall, was that he was going to start an AI church. And it was very early in the AI movement. And I do think I thought that he had definitively done it by doing it in the press at that moment, but it turns out I don't know anybody who's an acolyte of Lewandowski Church, but it does feel like there is opportunity even in the niche of people who are looking for an angle within the religious conflict space to propagate AI or to pay fealty to something they feel is superior. So I think it's going to be a very choppy, volatility, I agree, is the name of the next century.
The closest thing I saw to an AI church was going to that WorldCoin 2.0 announcement in Silicon Valley, or in San Francisco. Waymo drove me there. It was a big to-do. Sam got up on stage. Everybody was, it really reminded me of sort of like the Steve Jobs type of cult of personality. And I think that there's a similar opportunity, or maybe a main character will also emerge in this sort of world. And this, maybe we shouldn't be looking at religion more through the traditional sense, but maybe more so through the traditional sense and through the corporate sense, in that we're looking for, it'll probably be these corporate entities that are sort of leading the wave of deregulation and accelerationism, et cetera, which I think I feel the most aligned with ultimately, like not from a cult of personality perspective, but from I think a practical perspective. There's a lot of things. You can't sit here today and be, I guess you have to hold both that we live in the best of times, and also there are very acute issues with the economies and societies that we live in. And I really hope that we have a positive impact on that. But, I'm not sure we should think that is remotely likely. I think we should take probably the opposite approach.
Yeah, I will say one last thing. I think I was reading this book about a jewelry brand that's been around since the 60s. And I glimpsed in reading this book, I don't even understand exactly how it led me there, but I think, there remains the need for physical goods to run AI, for example. And I think entities that desire to be sovereign or that are sovereign and wish to maintain that may need human labor for some period of time in order to assure that they have the natural gas or hydroelectric or what have you to run the data center that has chips that are they open source? Are they NVIDIA? And I think there will be a real push for people who are, I don't know, the Singapores of the world, the UAEs of the world, to acquire access to artificial intelligence that cannot be taken away. And I think that is one dimension where grounding in concrete physical things may actually increase substantially as people want data centers at home on their own land.
It's going to be weird. It's going to be so weird, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, what other things? I mean, yeah, I feel like there's other things we can get into. We just spend an hour talking about AI, which is probably the right way to spend our time right now, frankly. I mean, okay, actually, this is going to be such a general question that's probably not useful, but maybe entertaining. What's your timeline to AGI? What's your quick answer to that? Like, we won't get into any context on it, but what's your timeline?
I guess I do want to ask, what's the definition? I mean, at what point? Like, it's already pretty good for prior, for tricking people, for example, which was the prior kind of test, the Turing test. I think we're there substantially. So
let's layer on sort of like the ability to have some, it seems like the biggest difference is some longer term goals that a thing can, work towards. So a more apt replacement of maybe some version of the leadership stack or the C-suite, if you will, by an agent or an AI.
I think like sub 3 years, like sooner than later.
Yeah, I think that legal is already largely automated for like opinions, maybe not for execution of legal contracts entirely, but so that feels like within 2 years you'll get a substantially better than average lawyer with a $200 a month subscription. So I'd say I think we will keep moving the bar up. And that we are already there substantially. And one question would be like, at what point is it no longer advantageous to have a human in the loop? Like, at what point is it worse chess with a human in the loop? And it probably depends on what you're doing. Like, I don't know. If you're doing some MEV shop, maybe we're already there. I don't think we are, but maybe if it's purely can be contained within the algorithm, then maybe we're already there.
I think we are. Yes. I think already today we have so much runway with the tech that we have. Like, you could already go build Cognicos. Like, the tech is good enough that you can go build Cognicos that could probably take on like many of the kind of tech centric industries that exist, right? The question is like, when are humans no longer the stewards and orchestrators and blah 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 blah. But I think we don't have to wait. We don't have to wait for anything,
I think that the point that I think you made there, Nicholas, which is important, is that looking at it in a general sense is probably unhelpful, and that you really need to look at it in a more niche sense, because the broad generalization and integration of these things might be a little further off, but in very specific. I mean, legal is just such an obvious thing. Like, it has had a very direct impact on even our workflows, right? Where you could have a high degree of trust and at least knowing what a contract says now without having to go through a lawyer and trust their opinion on things. And it seems like it's replaced humans for us there already. Not all, obviously, and there's still the strategy layer and sense making layer that's important, but on a very practical, job to be done. Here's an investment contract. How do we go make sure that we're, agreeing to the thing that we said we were going to go agree to? Like, we're there.
Yeah, and maybe that's one dimension that is easier to measure of AGI, which is at what point can you trust it better than you can trust a person, like an average person of that discipline. And that AGI per task is such that you can trust and don't need to verify, and use it to verify you. And I think legal for sure for non-lawyers, it's already there. Yeah.
Fascinating. I think within the next 5 years, we're going to have a meaningful amount of those type of examples. And I guess the big wild card is just like, do we get, orders of magnitude more value out of these new models that emerge, right? I mean, this pathway of just basically throwing more compute and more data at things and it being significantly better, like, does that continue? It's probably a bit of a debate in the space right now, but smart people seem to think yes. So I'm going to go with them. So, All right. What else do we do? Anything else you want to talk about here? I feel like there's some other.
Did we cover anything that we intended to cover?
I think we touched
covered
on
a lot.
literally
We kinda-
everything.
Yeah.
We covered most of it. We honestly covered most of it. There were a few things like, you know, Y token was a tweet from Jesse Walden talking about, you know, I think still so many people today are fixated on like, does this thing need a token? Is this thing going to be this decentralized protocol? And I think we've thought that was the wrong question for a very long time. And I think I've probably like for the last year, just like very clearly seen the like consumer token opportunity as being economic alignment with the sex of it, with the success of a thing that also captures the like social and cultural value of the thing. So I think he just succinctly kind of described that opportunity. And I also love seeing the like A16Z push back on it because they're just, still have such a narrow view of tokens. But
if someone asks why token, you can ignore them until they ask
100%.
win token.
Send tweet.
Because they will ask. They will ask win token. The time just hasn't come for them yet, and that's fine.
I mean, I love seeing Jesse's writing on this because, you know, as I've shared many times, his sort of the ownership economy thesis that I think he articulated very well in, I don't know, 2019 probably. I think it's still been a guiding. Like, I just deeply agree with it, and I think over the last few years we've sort of seen. I guess there's a debate of whether that was sort of like a too early take or if it was just like an incorrect take. And, you know, I think sitting here, you know, Jan 3rd, 2025 feels a lot more like Jan 3rd, 2020 to me than it feels like Jan 3rd, 2021, 22, 23, or 24, right? There's people like tokens. There are more tokens being issued. Their teams are funding themselves around these issuance of tokens. It's very clear that the attention narrative for valuation of tokens is sort of a dominant one right now. There's sort of like a, you know, and I think so much of the reason why there was sort of, you know, friction in that narrative over the last little while has been regulation, and it has been sort of user adoption or understanding. And you know, I think we'll look at the last 4 years as one where we really had to try to really manipulate and force what the big vision is for where I think, you know, community-owned networks and tokens could go into a world that is really, you know, fighting against it in some ways, or at least trying to put up barriers to it. And so like the question of like, I think that probably one of the most common conversations I've had with founders over the break, which is my favorite thing to do, is just have like broad winding conversations with founders over the break, was that they're like, risk on, baby. That this, you know, that right now the opportunity is really to lean into what the truest sort of manifestation of this technology and specifically of tokens. So yeah, I saw that post from Jesse. I was like, oh, cool. He's back to his basics here, which I think feels right.
I mean, I think really like my Y token is, it allows you to reward early usage in ways that previously was only reserved for early capital. It can capture, store, and productively use social and cultural value in ways that we have just never been able to do before. And if you don't create financial opportunity for your users, somebody else is going to. And I think like that applies to literally everything.
It's for traders. The question drives me fucking insane because it's a product for traders. Like, just let them trade your stupid little metadata and generate energy around you. It's the whole point is open markets, so that's why tokens, so people can trade it. What do you mean?
Volatility is energy.
It's right.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're in for, I think, a quarter of a significant number of token launches. The number of teams that I've heard are trying to line up a token launch for in and around inauguration is wild to me as well. Yeah. And so I don't know if that's bullish or bearish ultimately. But
actually, the one I'm most looking forward to is OpenSea.
Oh, you're just thinking it's going to be a dumpster fire, like a car crash that you want to watch.
I'm very curious to see how they do it. Mm-hmm. They've had like 8 years to fucking plan it. And then also, yeah, it probably will be. And, you know, that's always fun to see.
Well, because I think that the dynamic here is like the longer you go building an audience of people who are in many ways using your product because they, at least in part, think there will be a token coming, the harder it is for you to go launch a token for them. Far more data, far more users, probably a much higher private valuations for these things, sort of requiring a certain type of token launch. And I think OpenSea, I think Zora, I think MetaMask, I think all of these folks are huge opportunities, and yet I would not want to be in the trenches there trying to figure out how to actually go do a token launch for them, man. Like that is going to be very, very difficult.
Well, this is why you don't wait too long, because it just gets increasing. It gets progressively harder.
You have to have like some basic level of self-confidence to have launched a token though, right? And I don't think they did until Trump got elected, right? Like if they had launched this last time around, it would have been a double-digit billion-dollar token, right? Now I would be surprised if they got to, 10% of their last private round or something. Just because I have yet to truly screw around with their V2, but NFTs in general are just less of the zeitgeist as compared to whatever that was 4 years ago at this point. It's crazy. That's 4 years. Crypto time just going by instantly. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think Trump is kind of the signal for a lot of the people who are really, in relative terms, risk averse. But it's also like, dude, if you're building in crypto, why are you risk averse? Like, just do it, right? Do the thing.
Yeah, well, I think it's for this specific class of products that are U.S. based and had a lot of attention, right? And it's sort of like we had a lawyer once say that crypto is like everybody speeding down the highway, and some people are going to get pulled over by the cops for speeding, but there's probably a bunch of things you could do to make sure you're not the most likely person to get pulled over by the cops. And
you want to be the Corolla, not the Lambo, is
right. And I think an OpenSea last cycle was the Lambo, right? Like if they launched something there, it's very likely they would have had a ton of scrutiny. So I get it. It was probably the right decision for them to make from a personal, safety and freedom perspective. But yeah, I think it's made it very difficult for them to come and launch something.
I mean, ultimately, like their downfall wasn't because they didn't launch a token. It was because they just couldn't adapt and reinvent themselves for the new emerging metas. So,
well, I think yes, and also I think what having a token does is it creates that economic alignment such that teams should have more freedom to go and try different things, right? And so if we think of just like crypto being this like a constant path of ephemeral narratives, and that being relevant to those new narratives is actually essential to being relevant and period. That if you kind of go and start to deviate from your core path or your core users, they'll feel like you were doing something that is maybe in support of the devco or the holdco or the equity holders rather than the users of these things. Whereas if you kind of have this sort of like, I mean, I think Pudgy Penguins is probably a great example here, right? If you owned an NFT, you didn't care if they're going after Walmart sales that maybe never come back to you or IP deals or gifts or whatever. It was the key thing was that they were doing things that were likely to build more attention and build more value for this product in the future. And I think a fungible token that represents the core mission or idea or adventure that these teams are on, I think ultimately leads to a lot more flexibility, because as long as you can say, hey, we're building this, but we also see an opportunity over here, and that's maybe the more future-proof thing. We got to go try that out, but don't worry, it's adding value back to this core token. Yeah. I think people will be more open and willing to it, and I think maybe that is part of this dynamic. I think prior to Christmas, we saw the Zora, airdrop debacle, which was whatever. Comment on that all we want, kind of a ridiculous thing at some level, but ultimately, I think that there's clearly a deep wound there that many people in that network felt, which was that, oh, you've just been taking advantage of my attention and my usage, and you're not distributing that value back to me in some way. Or when you do that, it doesn't make me feel like I'm connected and worthwhile here. And I kind of wonder if they had a token, like would people care about the numerous different iterations they made? Because really those iterations were being driven by seeing the data, seeing the local maximo that they kind of got stuck into and needing to go and reinvent themselves. It just seemed that is value is going to the sort of the brand or the equity holders rather than the people who are actually using these networks. So
that was the core knock on OpenSea ultimately. Like, I think Josh is probably right. If they had a token even back in the day, I'm not sure that saves them necessarily for market positioning, but a lot of the salt would probably not be there, right? Where people are just like, literally, I gave you X amount of money in fees alone, right? And nothing, right? And it's not even nothing in terms of having no token. Often it's like, and I launched an NFT collection and got no support and was stonewalled, or like all sorts of other things that are not just related to that. But I like the Zora point. Like there's an alignment regardless of you just being on a mission with this team, whatever they're doing, if you have some upside with their token.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're going to see. I think one of the beliefs we had when we sort of launched C Club was that more teams would launch with kind of tokens at the core much earlier, and I think that hasn't proven to be true over the last little while, right? It's what we ended up seeing was safes plus token warrants, much higher valuations, private market raises, etc. And but I wonder if that's going to be more of the anomaly. So if we zoom out more and we look at the first 2013 to 2019 timeframe, and then we look at sort of end of 2024 into the future, do we just see more and more teams just going token first? I think yes. I mean, it's the far more native way to go do these things. And if we can, have a more generous regulatory environment or expansion of the gray zone or whatever ultimately happens there, I think it probably adds a lot of fuel to that.
I mean, I think AI16Z, Cerebro, like we have great examples of how well that can work, right? It's like under promise, over deliver, rapid execution, expanding opportunity space, some weird big mission that people are like excited by and bought into.
Yeah, I guess the question really for me comes down to like what maybe if we measure these things by the lows rather than the highs, like are we actually seeing progress that way? And I think if you look at these AI agents as like the NFTs of the cycle, that might be a bearish thing in some way, but I think because I think both sort of are built on promises of some future value that gets unlocked by this technology or by the holders of tokens in this technology. And I think, the vast majority of NFT projects failed to provide that or prove that. And I guess I think there's reason to be more optimistic in sort of this agentic world, but I don't think everybody launching launch pads and kind of trying to run the specific economic model is the most bullish thing. Like it just because virtuals is working right now, is that the right structure to have? I'm not sure. And I think what we'll likely see here is that, man, there's just so I think one of the links I provided was like one of these AI agents that was, they were literally just launching low market cap tokens, owning a major percentage of them and representing those as sort of network value in their AUM, right? And so it's sort of it's maybe an example of like short-termism and manipulation that can kind of come from this sort of stuff. And that probably leads to a lot of hype until there's some bottom that falls out of it, which is inevitable. I think in a volatile world, we're going to see these things retrace. And what does the unwinding there look like? So I think it's both important for us to be like, yeah, likely this stuff is going to be very, very valuable and impactful, et cetera. And also we should not forget about all the other types of things. Like if you take from AI16Z that venture capital is dead and that there's, everything's going to be retail and we'll launch with tokens, I think people are sort of missing the lessons of every bear market ever, where having long-term capitals and being able to build through it is actually essential, even when like having pure retail own, sort of be your backers of a 0-to-1 technology play. Probably not the most ideal. Probably not, because it's very fickle, very, very fickle bunch of us retailers out here.
And also, they don't really care for many people in the market don't care about the utility provided by the underlying. It's purely narrative plays.
Yeah.
Which are just don't care about the underlying utility of the thing, which is interesting, but also bodes poorly for projects whose value is based on a fundamentals analysis of what it is that they're giving the world. Just completely mixed incentives for them.
I'm really interested in where that shift comes, because I think it's very likely that where you need to get to here is, I guess maybe there's a core question of like, will tokens ever be valued on a fundamental basis? Right? Like, I mean, so if you think of it right now, you can dividend out rewards to people who are contributing value or who hold tokens. But many teams are not doing that, because as soon as you start to put like a revenue number on the board, it probably doesn't look great. So if you're making $10 million a year, great, you're making $10 million a year, but your network value is $3, $4, $5, $10 billion. So there's sort of like a reckoning that I think has to happen here before that is valued more than just a pure speculation and narrative value. And I think it might take a lot longer. And maybe, I don't know, does it ever happen? Or maybe it's a separate category that emerges. But I think how you go from narrative and speculation to fundamental value in these networks is going to be a very, very bumpy one.
Well, and like there's also this question of what is fundamental value, right? I think, Josh, you've said, okay, like market caps are probably not the best term for this, like network value. I'm not sure how you calculate that, but there is just a different way of understanding why these things have value than, a typical cash flow type of thing. So I also think we're building the bridge as you walk on it a little bit in that way too.
Crypto Twitter, come on.
Peace is distracting me with surfing videos and pictures of beautiful women right now.
The beautiful woman.
Hardcoin.
Beautiful.
Oh man. All right. Is there anything? I mean, can we just touch on this memes with a mission one? Because I think if we're talking about a world where a lot more tokens are being launched, we're going to see this sort of hero to villain arc play out a lot more readily, right? So I think if you're this is probably just pre-Christmas. Somebody launched a token for Mira, Siki Chen. I believe his daughter has some rare disease, and Mira token was sort of launched and ultimately kind of turned into this thing that led to a bunch of funding towards research for this, specific disease. And I think Siki here was, very actively engaged in the Twitter sphere around this, and it clearly captured a whole bunch of attention. I don't know what the ultimate amount of money that was raised from it was, but there's sort of this idea of a mission meme coin where, people were really encouraging the core token holder to dump tokens because there was like a good outcome on the end of it, and kind of played into almost this like growing attention and the ability to sort of siphon off a certain amount of that attention into real value that could be sort of invested. But then I think just a couple of days later, he launched a token on Pump.Fund called Zero, saying the worst things you could say to crypto Twitter, which is, this thing has no value. It is going to zero. Do not buy this token. It is going to zero. And of course, that is just like, crack to Pump.Fund users. And so they kind of bid it up quite a bit. And he sold into that pump, and now everybody calls him a scammer. And there's some debate on his sort of level of crypto fluency. And then there's the broader narrative around, how evil and shitty most crypto Twitter users are, and calling people scammers and such like that. And so I think my takeaway is like, this is still, there's launching tokens is still a very, 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 very bumpy thing. And it's like almost impossible to serve everybody here. And I sort of take it as an example of a hero to villain arc that I think took place in less than a week. So I don't know. I don't know if there's more to it than that, other than
this dude's bad at posting, but
good at DeSci.
Yeah, good at DeSci. Yeah, that's great. I mean, I like that someone else made the token. I mean, I love that someone else made the token, sent him supply. I think we should see a lot more of that, and hopefully, you don't get people posting bad after they get sent a bunch of tokens. And they just start posting really good.
I wonder if it's just like an inevitability.
Right. I think so.
I don't know.
More bad posts than good ones. It's a numbers game.
Yes. Well, and just seeing the scrutiny that he was sort of put under, because there's sort of, in that previous post, there was this idea of like, explain magic internet money to me. And yet, the guy was aping NFTs and airdrops and stuff a few years ago. And so that kind of brought into question his level of competency here, and whether he's just LARPing. And, I don't read any ill will from him here. I could see it's far more likely that he's just like, didn't know the impact of what he was doing. And, this stuff is fairly opaque ultimately at the even if you are a crypto participant. But, we talk about personal brand, you talk about reputation, et cetera, like that. Like, I think volatility comes to that as much as it comes to asset prices and, the broader economic sphere. All right. That was a good run, y'all.
Well, it reminds me of this tweet that Daniel Keller made. Would love to work out a contrarian position that Enron did nothing wrong and was simply the first postmodern financial institution ahead of its time. And maybe Siki, or I hope I'm saying that right, is not so different. But yeah,
that's weird because Enron's coming back. This Enron parody account is
I know
this running Twitter right now.
It's so good.
I really want to not like it, but I think they're going to really do well. I mean, this tweet that they made, basically, like, what was it? On January 6th, we will change this country forever. And then the response of like, oh, we sincerely apologize for early tweet referencing January 6th. This was an oversight by our social team and did not take into account the significance of this date in U.S. history. We have taken immediate action, parting ways with this individual responsible. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Just the masterful playing of the attention game here. So I think meme coin likely incoming. I can't imagine that t-shirts are the main thing that they're going to be using to monetize this. So we shall see. My guess is they launch it on Jan 6th. Let's get some prediction markets out there.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else you always want to get into? Get a good run.
Nope.
Yapped well.
Amazing. We yapped well. Let's get if we're not yapping on Twitter though, and in text form, it doesn't count towards our yap scores, and so we're probably got to transcript the hell out of this thing. Cool. Well, I wish everybody. I mean, it's 2025. We're going to be in for one hell of a run here. Very stoked that I get to kind of explore it with you guys. And we have some really fun things planned for C Club, leaning into this world that I think we see is coming a lot faster than maybe we once predicted. And I am like genuinely excited about what's ahead for all of us. So more on that soon. I'm glad we're back on video. This feels so much better than a Twitter space that we tried once and then bailed on because I couldn't stare at myself on screen, which apparently is kind of key to the affinity I have towards a medium. But we'll be back here again on Friday, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, episode 62 of Internet Explorers. These are going to be in the hundreds very soon. It's going to be awesome. Of course, we've been doing some Twitter spaces. Nicholas, your Twitter spaces with devs has been incredible from my point of view. I think you've been able to pull in some really great people that have gone into like the niches of sort of the builder world. I think you've done a great job of diving into mini apps across multiple networks, which I think we're going to see as be a major part of, kind of how people are interacting with crypto moving forward. So we do that on Wednesdays. Is that correct?
Thursday. We'll be back this coming
Thursday.
Thursday at noon Eastern time, 6 p.m.
Yes.
UTC. And
if you're building, come
there.
through. He does a great job of pulling people up to having conversations. So if this is sort of more of like a one-way conversation here, these Twitter spaces have been great to kind of to jam with people. So look forward to that. Ben, you got anything you want to shill here? What are you shilling?
Maybe liquid culture. I just chatted with Nat, and we've got a whole bunch of cool interviews and stuff coming through. I mean, so much of the media I think that we're all doing is just fun to be able to like open source the conversations that I think ultimately we're all already having, just working in the industry. So it's cool to just get to interview your friends who are smart and doing cool creative stuff. Look out for some episodes.
Awesome. Alrighty, well, let's leave it there. 2025, baby. Let's fucking go.
Get it.
All right, guys.
Let's do it. All right. See you next week.
Peace.
Thanks, everybody.